Today we'll be talking about using speech analytics to drive operational improvements in the collections call center. This is a vast industry, and given the realities of the COVID-19 pandemic, we're likely to see a significant increase in the number of collections operations operating in the call center environment. So any business, and in particular contact centers, we have at least 5 key operational challenges. And in no particular order, but one can almost hear the instructions coming down from the boardroom up above. The key operational challenges, any contact center, and the instructions are reduce the cost of operations. We all know those budget restrictions, budget restraints, the instructions to reduce operational costs at all costs. Secondly, we need to drive our efficiencies, and traditionally contact centers have been viewed by the executive level as being inefficient. So we need to be able to show and demonstrate significant improvements in our operational efficiencies. We also need to increase revenues, whether it is by means of sales or upsell, cross-sell, revenue generation through collections, or any other method or measurements that we use with the financial factor brought into account. And of course, we have risks. A few years ago, risks related essentially to financial risks. But today, thanks to social media and other channels, we are starting to see brand and reputational risk of being of really significant importance to contact centers, particularly when one considers that a typical call center agent or contact center agent could potentially handle between 18 and 20 to 25,000 interactions per annum with customers. And every one of those interactions, he or she carries that brand or that product and the reputational risk in every word they say. So it's become a really important consideration. And finally, whether we measure it in terms of customer satisfaction, customer effort management, customer journey satisfaction, there are many ways in which we can actually measure how our customers are experiencing their interaction with the contact center. So whatever we do in the contact center can more or less fall into one of those 5 categories. But we do know, sadly, that we're all under massive pressures to reduce costs. So we have budget cuts in IT spend, in headcount, in optimization of our contact centers. So we're faced with these challenges to do a whole lot more with considerably less in the way of resourcing. And we cannot even begin to think of compromising either on quality or on the compliance issues. Well, that is background. Let's take it to the next level. Today, I want to talk about these 3 things in the context of a collections call center. Let's look at hindsight, foresight, and insight. Number 1, hindsight. Understanding of a situation often long after it's happened. And certainly many of us would have had these experiences in life where we can look back and look at the circumstances and shake our heads, sometimes in disbelief at our own naivety in many cases, or lack of understanding. So a true understanding of hindsight can aid us tremendously in planning for the future, which is our foresight, the ability to predict what will happen or be needed in the future. And this is really important in any business, to be able to do that planning, to do budget forecasting, to do predictions of utilization of technologies, of manpower, etc. So foresight, it becomes a really important component of running a successful operation. And of course, it's the insight, capacity to gain an accurate and deep understanding of something, which allows us to mold and to focus our foresights and therefore run an effective operation. So today, in terms of, we're talking about speech analytics in call centers, in particular collections call centers, it's insights that we'll be focusing on essentially. But let's go back to our call center now, and assuming a contact center, understanding of a situation long after it's happened. Yes, we can get our reports from the system and our dialers and the technologies. We can perhaps pick up additional information from specific inputs by the agents and disposition codes. We may have supplemental notes from agents, etc. And of course, we have our collections and our management data that assists us. So we can certainly understand how things happened, but it's very difficult to know why it happened. When one considers, medium-sized contact center with 3 or 4, even 500 plus agents, making thousands of calls, very difficult to know what happened. And that's where we need that foresight, that ability to predict what happens in the future. So we'll use our analytics, we'll go back into our historical data, and we will use that to model our forward planning. We will have our processes and systems that will allow us to some extent to focus on the likely outcomes in the future. We will know our staffing, we'll know our skills, and ideally we will have our finance and performance management in place, and away we go with hopefully the appropriate technologies, whether it is the dialers or preview, predictive dialers, whatever technology we're using. We then blast forth with our campaigns, collection campaigns, largely crossing fingers that this foresight that we've modeled is correct. Now let's look at some of the typical challenges that we would find in any collections operation or in any contact center, but let's focus on a collections operation. Number one is poor data quality. And I think all of us have experienced to varying degrees when we start looking at the quality of the data, contactability, payment histories, etc. By and large, we are very often faced with really substandard source data. Unfortunately, technology, once again, is expensive, and we find many operations using inappropriate dialers or technologies. Efficiency is the watchword here and the key to it. So we really need to make sure that we do have the appropriate dialers, and whether it is preview or high volume predictive dialing, this has to be in place to really run an effective operation. We have connectivity issues, and particularly during the pandemic, with large numbers of workers, agents, and management working remotely, connectivity has become a major issue in our life. Connectivity not only has a knock-on effect on the agent's ability to connect to the data sources, it certainly has a negative effect in many cases on voice quality, which in turn frustrates the callers, frustrates agents, and has a negative impact on our ability to collect. Call blocking technologies and contactability. The bane of our lives in our industry, and more we are starting to see call blocking technologies interrupting our ability to connect. And despite of all the fancy tricks that we do in the background with changing numbers, etc., call blocking is a reality. COVID has brought with it a whole raft of realities, whether it is the work from home, it's the financial pressure, it's the pressure on the debtors, it's the pressure brought on the collections businesses by the credit providers. So there's a whole raft of realities that doesn't look like it's going to go away in the not too distant future. It's something we need to work with and to live with. These are our challenges. And of course, compliance issues. A lot of regulatory requirements, compliance requirements, and a lot more coming. We have the POPIA legislation and the legislations coming as well. So compliance issues will raise red flags across a lot of contact centers, and particularly the collections environment, where we need to focus a lot more energy and attention. And of course, the credit providers, they in turn are under pressure to produce results by their stakeholders, as the cascading effect of putting pressure on the collections agencies and credit and on the collections contact center operators. Huge pressure coming down from there. So typical challenge. We could expand on any one of those, but that's what we have to live with. So we have a few ladders. We all know the term payment ladders. So we have payment ladders. And of course, we have a number of snakes, and any one of those snakes can take us back to square one. So our trick is to use insights to understand where are the snakes and how do we avoid them. And of course, the positive side, know where the ladders are and how to climb them faster. These are the insights that we need to be able to plan and to predict our future in collections. So let's start building the case for speech analytics in the collections environment. And we will expand on this considerably in the next 5 to 10 minutes. But basically, speech analytics drives down costs through operational efficiency improvements. So we can certainly look at direct cost savings. Revenue generation, you'll be surprised how, with a few tweaks on your presentation scripts and some coaching and additional training that will come out of the insights that we get out of speech analytics, it can have a significant impact on increasing revenue generation. Customer and staff experience improves definitely from a customer point of view if we are coaching and training and refining the way in which our agents engage with customers or debtors. It will have a knock-on effect in terms of the positive relationships, the customer journey, and therefore knock on more positive revenue generation. And of course, compliance. Modern technologies, speech analytics technologies allow us to monitor 100% of every single call in and out of a call center. And we can monitor it for quality assurance, for compliance. We can even start generating automated scoring, which I will show you shortly. So speech analytics, just in those 4 areas, there's a very strong case for deploying it in the contact center. What sort of performance improvements do we see? Now, some of these figures I'm about to show you are quite startling, but I can assure you they're based on realities, not only from South Africa, but from deployments, speech analytic deployments elsewhere in the world. But the figures I'm showing you are validated and verified as South African performance improvements. Average handling time between 15 and 25%. That is a massive improvement in efficiencies. How do we achieve that? Well, by analyzing scripts, by analyzing call handling techniques, by coaching, by training, by finding ways to improve processes through speech analytics. All of that comes together and drives potentially massive improvements in handling times. First contact resolution. Once again, speech analytics allows us to refine our processes, procedures, and training and coaching that allows these sort of figures to start happening. Customer churn, obviously, it depends on the environment and the type of contact center we're running, but we certainly have seen a 10 to 15% decrease in typical customer churn coming through from contact centers. Employee satisfaction can rocket. On the one hand, there's some change management that needs to be done right up front when deploying speech analytics, because not all agents appreciate the fact that Big Brother is watching and that we're listening to every single call. But when it is treated maturely as a tool to enhance performance, to increase customer satisfaction and employee satisfaction, to show very clearly that speech analytics as a tool to aid coaching actually grows the agent's skills. So we have to be a bit careful about how we deploy it, but certainly we can look to those sort of improvements. And of course, customer satisfaction. The better that our agents engage with customers, the closer they follow the recommended scripts, the closer they follow their coaching and training, the better we're going to have in terms of customer satisfaction and customer journeys. So all of these performance improvements are real and they are attainable using speech analytics. So for debt recovery professionals or collections, just look at that lineup. Increased recovery rates, compliance, agent monitoring. We're able to monitor 100% of calls. certainly increase the promise to pay ratios. And won't go through the whole list there, but all of these actually manifest as bottom line profit to the operation. Show me the money. That's what the boardroom wants to see. Show me the money. So, mandatory discussions. We all know that in the collections environment, part of the payment ladder. If we have these discussions with our debtors, if those scripts are followed closely, if the training guides are followed closely, we get increase in promise to pays, and therefore we get increase in the collections. So each one of those we can monitor using speech analytics for presence of the actual words, phrases, and statements, or the absence of those mandatory discussions. And I'll show you that in a few slides down the line. So, how we know if agents are following training or instructions, speech analytics tells us that. We simply can't do it with random call selections, where in many operations it's maybe 6 or 8 calls per agent per month are monitored in terms of QA, and that is certainly not representative of the vast volumes that your average agent handles. So let's have a look very briefly at how speech analytics works. We have the interaction, in other words, the call with the customer. It is recorded, ideally in stereo, but it's not particularly serious if it's only in mono. That voice recording is transcribed using transcription engines, and it also runs against highly sophisticated language libraries. So here in South Africa, the locally developed speech analytics solutions runs English, Afrikaans, isiZulu, and Sesotho. And it's based on those two, that transcription and the indexing, which is carried out in the process. We start building queries that I will demonstrate in a few moments. And it's against those queries that we get the insights coming through from the analytics and the scorecards. And it's how we then operationalize those insights. Many of those insights will be down at the operational level, team leader, supervisor, but many of them will certainly have impact on the strategic and tactical elements in the boardroom. So look at speech analytics not only as a tool down at the operational level, but it certainly can provide actionable insights at an executive level. So there are basically 6 phases of speech analytics, and I've addressed the ingestion and extraction of text, the transcription process, and we'll look now very briefly at how that transcription works, how we build queries, and how we extract the insights. So here, typically, we have a screenshot of post-ingestion. So the calls have been ingested into the system pretty much within an hour, sometimes even considerably less. The person handling the analytics has their analytics tools available to them. So here you can see a typical conversation where we've split between the agent and the called party. So that pops up on the screen. So we have the speaker separation here, and if it's a stereo recording system, it's 100% agent and caller. If it's a mono system, it's not quite as accurate, but the algorithms have been developed that do very accurate speaker separation. So here we have queries. Now, building queries, we can drill down into a lot more detail. Go back on that, too fast. So here we are looking at building queries. So as you can see, the queries are simple words that are keyed into the system, or pulled out of a drop-downs in some systems. So we have words or phrases that are present or not present in the transcription. And you'll see later how we can build multiple levels of queries. So, and we can filter those by agent, by campaign type. There are many different ways of filtering the queries that we're building. So here you see words and phrases present or not present in the transcription. And here are just some typical words and phrases that we use to build these queries. So the simple calls are recorded. In other words, some of our recording compliance statements. You can see a whole raft of words there, both in English, in Afrikaans, isiZulu, and in Sesotho. So we would build our queries using all of those from our available phrases. There's a string of typical authentication words and phrases, payment negotiations, settlement discounts, and many, many more. The sponsors of this presentation, Corby, have built libraries running into several thousand words and phrases which are used typically in different verticals. So here we see we've run the queries against, let's take a hypothetical example of 1,000 calls. We've filtered it by agent, by team, by campaign, and here the analyst sees all those calls that meet the criteria in the query that we've just built. And down here on the right, you'll be able to see the actual point in the conversation where that query was hit. So in some cases where we have particularly long calls, for example, in just as an example, telesales of an insurance product, where we have extremely long conversations, 30, 40 minutes, and even longer in some cases. Using speech analytics, the individual, the QA or the assessor or the compliance officer looking for a particular point in that conversation is able to jump straight into where it is the query is hit, and is also able to play the conversation recording from that particular point. If at any point the person doing the analysis wishes to add a tag, whether it is an escalation, it's a tag for training, it's a tag for compliance, it's a tag for coaching, it's a tag for disciplinary, very easy to add that literally on the fly and escalate that to take it forward. Dashboards, and here are merely a few examples of the potentially hundreds of very easy to construct dashboards. Some are at an operational level and some are at an executive level. So typically here we have multiple filters. We've applied it across the potentially thousands of calls. We have word clouds that come out, and that really represents the frequency with which these words appear in the selection of calls that we have filtered out. Extremely powerful to see certain words popping up, and this is an indicator to the analyst to perhaps drill down further and understand why certain words are appearing more frequently than others. All of these dashboards are, number one, are very easy to construct and to tabulate, and of course very easy to export either as PDFs or export the raw data into other systems, whether it is Excel or Power BI or any other tools. This is one which should really excite people in the collections industry. This is simply an example of how speech analytics allows us to extract insights that become far more meaningful than random selection of a few calls. So bearing in mind this example would be an extraction or a report based on perhaps all of your agents across 5 to 10,000 calls, whatever it is. And as you can see, it tabulates 2 agents here, and we have overall performance scores, we have script compliance scores, we have risk mentions within the calls, etc. So in these examples, and please bear with me, these are purely examples, this particular agent needs some coaching for RPC confirmations. He's slipping a little bit here, and his stats are not looking where they should be. And RPC should in fact be a very, very high figure. Down here, where both agents are using incorrect disposition codes. And that's quite a significant error that's been identified there. In this example, we would certainly need to drill down and understand what habits are these agents sort of caught up in, that they're logging calls with incorrect disposition codes. But down here, for example, we're seeing that this particular agent has excellent compliance scores. He's doing all the right things and making sure that his interaction is fully compliant with regulations and legislation, etc. And there we have, of course, we need to start asking questions. Why is this happening? Why are we getting low figures in this particular area? So these reports are red flags and or green flags to any coach, team leader, supervisor, call center manager, or executive, to be able to show very clearly what is happening in the call center. These are the insights that we mentioned earlier. So typical improvements. Now, in early March of 2021, we carried out a survey amongst about 6 operators in the South African environment using speech analytics for at least the last 6 months. And I've aggregated these figures, but they are very, very real. We are seeing RPC to PTP ratios, improvements up in the 10% plus area. PTPs up by 12%. All of our compliances, starting at 9%, but I can see that going well into 15 and 20% improvements. All across aggregated performance quality metrics, a significant improvement, 25%, not to be sneezed at. The cost of collections, and that goes back to my earlier slide on driving efficiencies. Cost of collections down by 11%. And of course, the keep ratio, which drives the actual collections, improving significantly. So a lot of really tangible, demonstratable improvements, particularly in the collections environment. So we say it costs far less per agent than a takeout meal. Well, we're not going to use this platform to give any costs on it, but there you see a takeout hamburger with extra fries and a family-sized Coke to take away. That's about the cost per agent per month that you could expect to have these sort of improvements in your contact center. So in summary, let's have a look at it. The benefits of speech analytics, specifically in the collections environment. Number 1, analyze 100% of all of your calls for, and I've just put up some examples, regulatory, process and script, call quality, abusive and aggressive language, both sides, agent and customers, risk mitigation, in-call silences. As we know, in-call silences can mean several things. One is agent lack of training, experience, access to information, slow systems, etc. It can also mean agent shenanigans, where the customer might have hung up the call, but the agent keeps the call open simply to kill some time and prevent having to take another call. All manner of unacceptable agent behavior, performance. It gives us the ability to revise and redesign strategies and tactics. Overall, dramatically improve revenues, and that's the name of the game, is show me the money. Ka-ching, ka-ching. So after that dates me 40 plus years in the call center, contact center industry, running operations, building operations, advising, consulting, and auditing. After almost 18 months involvement with speech analytics in the South African contact center environment, that statement is real. Speech analytics has become essential to all contact centers, and it's no longer merely an option or a nice to have. It's become affordable, it's become very easy to deploy, it needs very little, if any, In fact, no additional technologies on site. Very easy to use. It's as easy as a Google search, and you've seen the figures. I mean, this is really starting to rock in terms of performance improvement. So that's my closing statement on that. And if you would like any further information or any particular queries or questions, please contact me directly. I'm acting here and speaking as a brand ambassador for Corby. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Goodbye.